The Supreme Court Justice's wife was secretly pocketing money from a group with an interest in a case before the court. Yeah, that's right. Per the Washington Post exclusive, well, the payments came from conservative judicial activist Leonard Leo. We should have a picture of him here. Yeah, here is the man. Leo is a leader within the Federalist Society. Well, he arranged for Thomas's wife to be paid tens of thousands of dollars for consulting work, but insisted her name be left off the invoicing. That's interesting. This is what the Post had to say. In January of 2012, Leo instructed the GOP pollster Kellyanne Conway to bill a nonprofit group he advises and use that money to pay Virginia Ginni Thomas, the documents show. The same year, the nonprofit, the Judicial Education Project, filed a brief to the Supreme Court in a landmark voting rights case. Leo, a key figure in a network of nonprofits that has worked to support the nominations of conservative judges, told Conway that he wanted her to give Ginni Thomas another $25K, the documents show. He emphasized that the paperwork should have no mention of Ginni, of course. Now, Conway then issued a $25,000 bill to the nonprofit that Leo advises and listed the purpose as supplement for constitution, polling, and opinion consulting. Yeah, so the monies in total appear to hit the six-figure mark. This, again, per the Post. In all, according to the documents, the polling company paid Thomas's firm, Liberty Consulting, $80,000 between June 2011 and June 2012, and it expected to pay $20,000 more before the end of 2012. The documents reviewed by the Post do not indicate the precise nature of any work Thomas did for the Judicial Education Project or the polling company. This is interesting. In the wake of all of these things coming out about Thomas, I am not surprised that it also extends to his wife, getting these kind of little backdoor deals, it seems. Cenk, are you surprised?
Yeah, no, I'm not, but this one does cross the Rubicon. So we'll have to see. I was gonna say wait till trial. It's funny, people with power being held accountable. Hilarious, sorry. Of course that's not gonna happen. But the part that if there were a trial for corruption, which there should be, the part I'd be most interested in is, did her company actually do any work at all for this or these organizations that she got paid by? But my guess is that she didn't do a lot of work as an opinion consultant. I didn't know that there was opinion consultants. I should be rich then based on that. But opinion consultant sounds like the biggest BS title I have ever heard in my life, and an obvious excuse to funnel her money, which appears to be out and out bribery of a Supreme Court justice. That is his wife. It goes directly in the pocket of Clarence Thomas. And the fact that he said leave out her name, of course, indicates intent to cover up the fact that they are bribing a Supreme Court justice. So this crosses the Rubicon. I mean, you could, look, we all know that the rest of it was corruption as well, but they could go to court, like if there was a trial again in this fanciful world where the people in power in America are ever held accountable under any circumstance. But if you were a trial and it's super hard to convict, they could say, well, okay, one was the mom and he was being nice to the mom, the other was the kid and he was being nice to the kid, and the others were vacations. And yes, in total, it was millions and millions of dollars funneled to Clarence Thomas and his wife, but golly gee, we're just friends, right? But when you pay his wife for opinion consulting and you say, now make sure no one finds out about this, that's a goddamn bribe.
Absolutely. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, not at all.
So look, if someone were to say, "Hey, I really want to help you out, but don't let anyone know." Like this isn't the Larry David episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where he wants to anonymously donate for the wing. Like this is complete and utter bribery for policy to be shifted, power to be installed, and cases to be heard with a conflict of interest. The group that Adrian discussed with Kellyanne Conway, Judicial Educational Project, they filed a brief in front of the Supreme Court and Clarence Thomas overheard it.
Yep, we're gonna go into that one.
Go ahead, go for it.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, first off, we are definitely going to check on the response that we got because the Thomases, of course, didn't respond. But Leo made a short statement, which Conway kind of regurgitated this morning on Fox News.
This was 2011, 2012, according to the Washington Post. Leonard Leo is quoted in that article. I think it's an important quote. He says, I've known the Thomases, they've been my friends since 1990, and I'm very mindful of how vicious and gossipy people can be, so I always try to protect their privacy and their safety. Viciousness from 10 years ago, 11 years ago, has turned into violence now, where people are outside of Supreme Court justices' homes trying to assassinate Justice Kavanaugh while his wife and daughters are sleeping in that home. So these people will stop at nothing. They want Clarence Thomas to resign so Joe Biden, of all people, can replace him with one of his own. In this case, Ginni Thomas was one of my contractors, and she had worked at the Heritage Foundation. She was part of the grassroots, is part of the grassroots. She had worked in the Reagan administration. This is a serious person who for years had worked in public policy. And at the polling company, we did public opinion research and data analytics. We had no business before the court.
And Kellyanne Conway had no business getting that tune-up because like the facelift, she was hitting it. But let's back to the case. So that polling company, it also, again, had no business before the court. But the thing is that judicial education project that Leo was advising on definitely did. This per the Post. In December 2012, the Judicial Education Project submitted an amicus brief in Shelby County versus Holder, a case challenging a landmark civil rights law aimed at protecting minority voters. The court struck down a formula in the Voting Rights Act that determined which states had to obtain federal clearance before changing their voting rules and procedures. Clarence Thomas was part of the 5-4 majority. Thomas issued a concurring opinion in the case, arguing that the pre-clearance requirements itself is unconstitutional. Thomas's opinion, which was consistent with a previous opinion he wrote, favored the outcome the Judicial Education Project and several other conservative organizations had advocated in their amicus briefs. He did not cite the Judicial Education Project brief. I still do not care if he did not cite it in any way. I can tell you as someone who has clerked for a chief judge in the Court of Appeals, that those judges have significant sway with their fellow judges. They sit in a conference, they lobby, they go back and forth with each other months to push the decision and the ruling that they want. So if there was some kind of agreement with the Thomases and this outside judicial education project to ensure that this aspect of the Voting Rights Act was not upheld and preserved, then my God, that could mean Thomas leveraged a little bit more and pushed a little bit more to ensure it was 5-4. And also you look at the timing of when the money was paid. The project paid $100,000 to Ginni Thomas just a few months before the Supreme Court adjudicated this case, which meant that the court probably had the case pending before them around the time that the last payment was made. The timing is enough to raise concerns of impropriety that should have compelled Thomas to recuse himself. These people are corrupt as hell.
So look, there's a couple of things here that are indisputable. When your wife gets paid by this group and then you are the deciding vote in a case that group is involved in, that is not anywhere near close. There isn't a single judge that would tell you that that's kosher, that you have to, at a minimum, recuse yourself. If they were not if Clarence Thomas was not a Supreme Court justice, there would definitely be proceedings against him if he was a judge and did this. So it's absolutely outrageous. Second of all, one of our members made a great point last night when we were covering a different corruption story involving Clarence Thomas. Remember that the judges are also supposed to avoid the appearance of corruption. Well, if this isn't at a bare minimum the appearance of corruption, you've got trouble with your vision, okay? It's definitely, no one could dispute that it's the appearance of corruption, let alone corruption itself. So then Kellyanne Conway's excuses, well, Ginni Thomas, she also works at the Heritage Foundation, so she's a serious person. No, at the Heritage Foundation, also funded by donors like Harlan Crow, they funnel even more money to her. So her excuse for, well, we might, it seems like we bribed her in this case, but remember, we institutionally bribe her every year through the Heritage Foundation. That's why Clarence is a good boy and decides all the cases in our favor. And she said, look, we need secrecy because people are so angry now at the Supreme Court justices. That's why we have to do the bribes in secret. but I don't know what they're angry about.
I'll wrap it with this. We have only heard of different stories now, and they've come out recently in the past few years, and this is all that we know. And this is like the tip of the iceberg when it comes to a message that Cenk has had for years, which is getting money out of politics. Who paid for Brett Kavanaugh's baseball tickets? When Brett Kavanaugh purchased a home in Maryland, he didn't have enough to buy the home. His records even show that. Who paid for his house? Like Harlan Crow donating, and I'm sorry, Harlan Crow putting up Clarence Thomas and Ginni Thomas in these lavish yachts and taking them on these trips. We only know of a few trips. Neil Gorsuch, 9 days after he was sworn in, was able to sell off his property to a firm whose case came before the Supreme Court, and he saw and he witnessed the corruption with John Roberts, who's supposed to be like the moderate guy on the court. There's more there too. So again, this is all that we know. I am dying to know what else is there because again, tip of the iceberg corruption with these people.
100%.
Yes,
I gotta say something about that. Sheldon Whitehouse did a great job, a Democratic senator, in explaining that Scalia, back when he was on the court, took 70 trips paid for by Republican donors. We only know about 2 of them, but he took over 70 trips. So these Supreme Court justices, it appears, have been being bribed by business interests for decades now. And whenever you go to regulate them, they're like, well, we're all bribed, so we're not gonna do anything about it. They sent a letter in saying all 9 justices, yes, including the ones that are theoretically left-wing, saying, in essence, we're not gonna do a goddamn thing about it. What are you gonna do now, huh? We're just gonna keep taking the money and keep deciding cases all for the people who bribed us. It's unbelievable how outrageous it is. And by the way, this whole idea that, this is a political hit job because the Democrats want to replace Clarence Thomas while Joe Biden is president. They can't even do that because Dianne Feinstein is not mentally competent.
That's right.
And she's not in the Senate. She's sick in a hospital bed. She should have resigned years ago. But instead, like all fossils holding on to power, she's like, no, I'm never gonna resign. So the Democrats couldn't even replace Clarence Thomas anyway in their deep, deep incompetence. And besides which, guys, there's no way in the world they're gonna replace Clarence Thomas. I mean, we're looking for bare minimum accountability. For God's sake, recuse yourself every time your wife gets bribed. That's too much to ask for. And right now, the Supreme Court justices are saying, yeah, that's too much to ask for. We're just gonna keep taking the bribes and there isn't anything you could do about it.
And the funny thing is, with the wife also being involved with January 6th and the efforts to overturn Biden's win. But I will also say there's one entity that could probably hold them accountable, and that's the IRS. Because I know that if they're not putting certain things on receipts, they're not registering it correctly, they're not logging it correctly. And that's also why the Republicans pretty much want to defund the IRS and make them go away, because that's the only entity could really snatch up some of these bribery-based hoes.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.